morning. Hey, hope everyone enjoyed the coffee and the great food. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Startup Grind. For those people that haven't been here to a Startup Grind event before, Startup Grind is the world's biggest network of startup events, founded in San Francisco about 7 or 8 years ago. And it has a really strong ethos, which is about giving first. And I think it's important when you come to a startup community that you sort of don't walk into it going, you know, what can I sell people today? I think you need to walk into a startup community and say, how can I help people? And if you do that, then I think good things will happen. But you might want to know, well, why is a startup community important? Well, you know, running a startup's a really, really hard thing. And you actually have to wear a lot of hats when you're doing a startup. You know, one day you're doing a press release, next day you're doing user interface design, next day you're like figuring out what data you need to collect. So, and you have to wear a lot of hats. And what's great about a startup community is if you come up against a problem that you haven't seen before and you can't figure it out, then probably someone else in the startup community has had that same problem before. And you can actually reach out to them and they can help you out. So maybe you'll solve that problem in, you know, days or, you know, hours instead of days or weeks. Hands up who is a first timer here at Startup Grind. Ooh, lots of virgin grinders. That's really cool. So welcome to you. For those who don't know me, my name is Brendan Yell. I wear a few different hats apart from Startup Grind. I run IBM's entrepreneur program. I founded a company called shopfree.com way back in 1999. I lived in San Francisco for a couple of years and came back here and started sort of mentoring in the startup scene. If you want to find me, I'm pretty easy to find at Brendan Yell. There is a hashtag called Where's Yelly, mostly related to the fact that I travel a lot. And you can please reach out to me if I can help you at all. We want to thank our partners today. Pivotal Labs, thank you for this lovely space. What a great venue. So thank them very much. This is just a fantastic venue and great to be here. Sasha Gray is the General Manager of Australia and New Zealand for Hired.com. So I just want to do a shout out to Sasha and say thanks for putting on the lovely food and the coffee, and thanks to Vanilla Blue. Everyone's been saying how good the food was this morning. And also thanks to your team as well. Sarah, Tara, thanks so much for all your help. It's been really, really smooth. Of course, this event is part of the Spark Festival. Who's been to some other Spark events this week? Cool. Who's been to more than 3 Spark events this week? Wow, that's cool. That's really cool. So Spark is basically the old, what was used to be called the Startup Week, Sydney Startup Week, now rebranded with the support of the New South Wales State Government and the City of Sydney. So I just want to do a shout out to them and thank them for their involvement and support for this week. I was told there's been more than 100 events in the last 10 days, so it's been a pretty active festival. I mentioned before my day job, I run the entrepreneur program for IBM in Asia Pacific, and basically that program, if you're a startup less than 3 years old, we give you anything up to $120,000 in hosting credits on the Bluemix platform. We have a number of our startups in the room today, so if you're a startup and want some free servers, come and see me or any of our engineers. We've got Lucas Chua, who's down from Singapore. Here's Chewy. Hey mate, thanks for coming. Craig Murphy, where's Craig? Craig's one of our infrastructure engineers, so if you need to figure out how to put servers together, these are some of the people to talk to. We also want to thank some of our partners, 360 Degrees. We're currently filming in 360 Degrees, so I can go all around here and it'll be recorded. So thanks to the guys for filming that. This will be up on YouTube in the next 24 hours. Hall Chadwick. Hall Chadwick has been a long-time supporter of Startup Grind. In fact, without them, we probably wouldn't have a chapter here in Sydney. David Kenny at the back there, David, is a partner at Hall Chadwick, and they've done a lot of work with startups for mergers, acquisitions, capital raising. They do a lot of work with Freelancer on their ASX listing. So if you need some help in that area, David's just a great guy to talk to, and he's very open with his time. And in fact, we'll have our next Startup Grind event. We'll be back at Hall Chadwick. So thanks, David, for your support. I really appreciate it. One thing we do at Startup Grind is sometimes people come to this event, they don't really know who's in the room. So what we do is we actually feature some attendees here. So Andrew Campbell, where's Mr. Andrew Campbell? There's Campbell, hey mate. So Andrew's the founder or co-founder of GoCatch, the taxi app. But he's also the program director at Slingshot. If you don't know Slingshot, they run more accelerator programs than anyone in the country. They run from people like NRMA, HCF, and Simplot. So in fact, their HCF, the HCF program, applications are open at the moment. So if you want to find out how to get into an accelerator program, go and talk to Andrew. He's a fantastic mentor and very active in the startup scene. Al Bentley, where's Al? Hey mate. So Al Bentley is the founder of Simply Wall Street. I met Al probably almost 2 years ago, and I think when I met him and his team for the first time, I probably never met a founder that had such a clear vision of what he wanted to do and what he wanted to achieve. Simply Wall Street basically takes stock market data and provides a visualization of that so that you can very quickly determine the attributes of the stock. Al's also very active in the startup scene. If you're part of the Facebook group, Sydney Startups, you'll see Al posting in there and replying and arguing with people all the time about it. But what's really cool is he's got his own emerging startup, but he's still already realised the power of giving back to the startup community. Startup Weekend, which was basically defunct for 2 years, Al got it going again, was it about a month ago, and ran a great event. There's another event happening, I think it was early next year. So thanks Al, and great to have you here, mate. Aaron Day, I haven't seen Aaron turn up yet. I don't know if he's here. Aaron's the founder of Soccer Brain that went through the Murray accelerator program. Soccer Brain, actually when I met Aaron, he described the problem to me, and I'd just taken over being a coach for my kids' soccer team. And basically what it does is provides instructional videos for kids soccer coaches, but it's a real global play. Aaron is a very persistent entrepreneur. He almost got arrested for basically stalking Tim Cahill, but Tim Cahill did eventually give in and actually had a meeting with him and is actually supporting Soccer Brain. So I think Aaron's here, but yeah, a great entrepreneur. Danielle Cito, where's Danielle? Here she is. Hey, Danielle's the CEO of FinTech Australia, basically trying to bring a lot of the FinTech startups together and bring them together with a single voice. So welcome, Danielle. Great to have you here. Now, we want to get a little bit social today, so if you want to put a tweet out or Instagram, or I think there are some people still doing Snapchat, there's a hashtag there, so @StartupGrind, or just the hashtag StartupGrind. And we're going to have some questions from Matt at the end. So if you go to slido.com, you can go to on your phone, it's super easy to use. Just put in the hashtag SUG. You can ask a question, you can even ask it anonymously if you like. Our next Startup Grind event, we're actually doing the Startup Grind Summer Party. We're actually doubling up, so we've got 2 great founders. So we've got James Chin Mooney, the CEO of Sendle. I don't know if anyone remembers James, who was on that show, The New Inventors on ABC a few years ago. He actually had a startup called To Share, which was basically like, yeah, I want to hire, someone's trailer or someone's, whippersnipper. And then he actually realised there was no logistical way to get some of these items around. So actually, they spun out a second startup called Sendle. And Rebecca Campbell, who started the first company was called Posse. Now it's rolled in and it's called Hey You. She's attracted investment from Lars Rasmussen, who was the founder of Google Maps. So we're going to have 2 great speakers, December 1st, back at Hall Chadwick, and it's going to be a fun party. So come along, it'll be in the evening. So there may or may not be wine and beer served. So I'd like everyone to stand up for me. What we're going to do is give Matt a real big Startup Grind welcome. So he's a serial founder. He's the founder of 99 Designs. He's the founder of Flippa. He's the founder and CEO of Hive.com. Please give it up for Matt Mickiewicz. Hey Matt, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no worries. So you've been in Australia just a short time?
Just 5 days.
Wow, that's crazy. And when are you out?
Tomorrow morning.
Tomorrow morning, so that's a quick trip.
It's a very quick trip.
Cool. Well, congratulations on the launch of Hive.com.
Thank you very much.
It's a very good thing. But what I want to do is I want to sort of step back and talk a little bit about your history and how you ended up, the founder of so many successful companies. I think we all know what the secret is. But yeah, tell me about where did you grow up? Where were you born?
I was born in Krakow, Poland. When I was 3 years old, my parents immigrated to Germany. We lived there for 4 years. During that time, they applied for immigration status to the US, Australia, New Zealand, Canada. Canada came through first, so we ended up in Vancouver, Canada, where I've lived since 1991.
Okay. And how did you end up in Australia? I mean, and how did sort of SitePoint get going?
Yeah, great question. So around 1997, 1998, I was teaching myself web development, web design. I was going through the motions. I was finding a lot of useful resources, information along the way. I thought I'd put it out there on the World Wide Web to share it with other people who might be going through the same thing I was. I created a little website called Webmaster Resources back in 1999. That became incredibly popular. Literally within weeks of launching, I was in the LA Times website of the day on USA Today. Windows Magazine, which at the time had over 1 million subscribers, ended up doing a full page write-up about the website. And then advertisers came knocking on my door, gave me checks for thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of dollars, having absolutely no idea that I was in high school. In fact,
Oh my gosh.
in fact, I was the first person in my high school to get a cell phone. And during lunch hours, I would do sales calls. I'd come back to like third period class, I made like a couple $1,000s. But my meetings always had a hard stop at 1 o'clock. But I had like, oh, I have another meeting, another call at 1 o'clock. But it was actually like math class or something.
And did that take the focus off your schoolwork? How did that work?
Yeah, it was a huge distraction, and my grades suffered. Thankfully, my teachers were very understanding.
And how did that roll into SitePoint?
Yeah, so along the way, while running Webmaster Resources, I met a guy by the name of Mark Harbottle, based in Melbourne, Australia, who was working at a software company here marketing HTML editing software, and started doing advertising deals and marketing partnerships with him. Along the way, as we got to know each other, I realized he had entrepreneurial ambitions and he wanted to leave his own company. He was really excited about this space and the early traction I had gotten with Webmaster Resources, so we decided to partner. I flew down here in November of 1999 with my mom in tow. She was a little bit suspicious about me flying down to meet somebody 10 years older than me who I met over the internet. Understandably so. We shook hands on it, spent a couple of weeks in Melbourne. In the following summer, I came down here and lived there for a few months while we opened our first office and started hiring our first couple employees.
Cool. And that was with your family?
What?
That was with your family?
No, I was able to live here by myself when I was 16.
That's cool. So SitePoint kind of took off, and then how did it evolve, and when did you look to do something else?
Yeah, so initially it was just an advertising-supported website, which was fantastic in 1999. Much less so after the dot-com bubble burst in March of 2000, and all of our advertisers basically either started cutting their marketing budgets or going out of business altogether. So we actually had to quickly pivot, and what we ended up doing is we ended up taking our most popular content, which at the time was a tutorial about PHP and MySQL, and turning it into a print-on-demand book that we sold for $40. And despite the fact that this content was available entirely for free, people were willing to pay for the privilege of having it in hard copy format next to their keyboard while they were learning to program. And we sold tens of thousands of copies of this book, and it basically saved the business. And we've gone to this direct publishing model for the next few years.
Cool. And look, 99 Designs was one of those companies for me, a bit like Invato, that I didn't know was Australian. I was a customer of 99 Designs for many years until I finally got a taxi invoice one day and I was like, why is this American company charging me GST? And then realized it was actually a Melbourne-based company. So talk to me about how 99 Designs got going.
Yeah, so one of the great things about SitePoint is because it had millions and millions of visitors every single month, we had a really vibrant community of web designers. Around 2006, 2007, what we saw happening is they started playing this game called Photoshop Tennis. Basically, they would create these made-up fictional contests and compete against each other to see who would be like the crowning design champion of the week. So they all submit their design ideas, at the end they'd have a vote and somebody would be crowned the champion. Eventually, some of the other members in our community saw this activity happening. They saw these fantastic designers spending hours, sometimes tens of hours, on these made-up fictional projects with no reward other than fame and glory. So they jumped in there and started offering cash prizes for design work that needed to be done. The designers just jumped on the opportunity. All of a sudden, they had access to a paying client. They got to practice their skill sets, improve as a designer, plus they kind of fueled that competitive spirit that many people have.
And this is a completely new business model, right?
It was a completely new business model at the time. Initially, we just started charging small business owners $10 to post a design contest. Eventually, as it continued growing, gaining traction, all on its own, without any marketing or pushing on our behalf, we decided that what we really needed was a separate brand. SitePoint stood for educating web developers and web designers. It did not stand as a place to go get as a small business owner for you to buy like a logo or business card or a pamphlet, get that service delivered. So we decided to create 99 Designs, which we spun off in 2008.
Cool. And did you raise some capital for 99 Designs, or did you just bootstrap it all the way?
We bootstrapped it with our own cash, putting a couple $100,000 initially. And for the first 3 years, the company was entirely self-sustaining and funded.
Cool. And how quickly did it get successful?
I mean, we had a lot of traction before we spun it out, so we knew we had product market fit because we saw small business owners like dentists coming to SitePoint.com, going to our forums, clicking on that link called like design contest, and figuring out how to post a design contest, despite the fact that we had no customer support, no documentation, and it was buried 4 layers deep in our hierarchy. So when people want to jump through that many groups to find you, and you have like no idea how that happened, that's like a really strong signal that you're onto a big idea.
Yeah, cool. I think I had a logo done I'm trying to think what year it was, maybe 2001, 2002, and the award winner was in Cuba. I thought that was really cool. But, so there was obviously a lot of designers from developing countries, and how did you market to them, or how did they find out about it?
Yeah, we've actually never really marketed to designers. We just bring them vulnerable projects that they otherwise wouldn't have access to, and they've shown up in droves. Over 1 million designers now. It's been absolutely fantastic. And the lives that we've changed along the way, some of the stories that we've gotten have been like really touching. And we've had people who were able to pay for wedding dowries, be able to pay for their parents' medical bills, be able to, you know, upgrade their lifestyle, their housing situation. We now have collectives in Indonesia where designers pool the money and distribute it monthly, so they have a regular, more predictable income source. And it's just been like really, really amazing.
So where's 99 Designs at now? Like how many monthly uniques does it get? What's the business look like now?
Yeah, I mean the business now operates in multiple languages. We have an office in Japan, there's a presence in Brazil, an office in Berlin. Obviously we have offices in Melbourne and San Francisco as well. There's thousands and thousands of design contests being put forth and millions of dollars being paid out to designers on a monthly basis. AFR recently had an article that said 99 Designs might go public at some point.
Dedicated second. Now Flippa, talk to me about that. That was obviously probably another SitePoint spin out, is that right?
Exactly. So within the SitePoint community, we had a lot of developers who started buying and selling websites and domain names and just doing business amongst each other. And we saw this activity happening, and once again thought that a forum wasn't the best venue to build a marketplace with trust and safety as part of its core value offering. So we decided to productize that and spin it off as a separate company in 2009.
Okay, cool. And who runs Flippa now? Where does that come from?
Yeah, so Flippa has an office here in Melbourne, in Collingwood. We have a CEO, Tony Barrett, who joined us out of Seek. He runs that business on a day-to-day basis. I'm on the board of directors. My co-founder is on the board of directors. We help along the way, but the company is doing really well.
Cool. Now, just talk to me about the genesis of Hired. How did that sort of come about? What was your interest in recruitment? Seems like not necessarily what you'd done in the past, but yeah, talk to me how that came about.
Yeah, so Hired was actually born out of my frustration with recruiting agencies and that entire process. As 99 Designs hit hyper growth, we raised our $35 million Series A. We wanted to start hiring developers and designers at a pretty big pace, and we found the process incredibly frustrating. We're paying hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to these recruiters. They were making more money than me. They often weren't the brightest bulbs in the room, and quite frankly, they were hated by both sides of the transaction. The software engineers didn't like dealing with their recruiters. We didn't like dealing with them either. And they were making so much money. Anytime you have a middleman that's despised by both sides of the transaction, that spells opportunity. So I actually went on AngelList and I looked at the recruiting and HR category. At the time, there were 450 different companies trying to tackle the problem. But what I found out when I dug deeper over the course of 2 weeks is that everybody was playing around the edges of the problem. They were doing coding interviews, video interviewing tools, applicant tracking systems, background checks, you name it. But nobody was actually going for the jugular and saying, I'm only going to get paid if I find you somebody who you're happy to work with 50, 60 hours a week. That to me was like a huge missed opportunity. So we decided to start the business essentially out of the frustration with the status quo and to solve our own problem.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty bold because I mean, AngelList said 450 different people trying to tackle the problem. I reckon it's probably 4,500. I probably need one recruitment app or unique solution. So, so that was pretty bold then, if you're just going to go in there for it. What was your kind of thinking behind it that you could actually solve this problem?
Yeah, so when I was doing all the research, I realized every single company in this space was going after the employer value proposition. We realized that as we move towards an innovation economy and knowledge workers become more valuable, more scarce, and higher and more well paid, that would be all about the candidate experience. So we wanted to create the best job search experience possible for someone to find a new opportunity. And along the way, what we found through different reports and research data is this shocking statistic. 87% of people worldwide are unhappy and disengaged at their job. The US isn't much better, it's at 70% right now. But despite the shocking statistic, only 20% of people plan to even begin looking for a new opportunity because the process sucks so bad. Like how much better would the world be if people were actively engaged in their job, if they liked what they were working on, they liked their coworkers, they were being fairly compensated, and they were learning and growing as a career professional.
Yeah, cool. I mean, marketplaces are obviously very popular at the moment. You've been doing them for a while. Marketplaces, I think, to investors are kind of like startup cocaine. They kind of just can't get enough of it. But So you've done some different marketplaces. What are the keys? Because you've got both sides, and how do you figure out? Because it's a chicken. You need one. You need both to make it work, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we were launching the company, we actually staged it out into 3 phases with a breakpoint at each phase. So if we couldn't get traction or a certain proof point, we would cut it off. The first phase, all we did was build a simple landing page explaining the value proposition to developers. We emailed developers, and lo and behold, they signed up. If at that point we had gotten 0 developer interest, we would have cut off the project altogether. Second phase was obviously the employers. We thought this would be by far the easiest side of the marketplace to build because absolutely everybody is hiring. So we once again built a landing page, emailed a whole bunch of companies, and all we got back was cricket sounds. It was actually really disappointing. The value proposition to me was very straightforward. No credit card up front, look at profiles, interview as many people as you want for free, only pay us if you're successful. But we didn't have credibility in the market, and the hiring managers and the internal recruiters kind of weren't willing to take a risk on us. So what we ended up doing is we went to their investors instead. We went to the first round capital, to Grade Off, to Sequoia Capital, and had them introduce us and email portfolio companies on our behalf. That's how we got the first couple dozen of employers signed up on the platform. The third real proof point for us happened right before Burning Man. My co-founder, in a mad 48-hour coding session, built a platform that allowed candidates and companies to see each other and interact with each other. He hit the launch switch and ran off into the desert. And me and my other business partner were like left to see what would happen. And over the course of 2 weeks, we had 88 developers that got $30 million in job offers, which had far, far surpassed our expectations. So we knew we're onto something big by that point.
And so you raised money reasonably early in this journey with Hive. Why was that? Why did you, as opposed to bootstrapping like you've done in the past?
Yeah, absolutely. The reason why we decided to raise money early on was because of the response that we got to our very first media article. So once TechCrunch wrote that developer auction, which was what the company was called at the time, had this crazy number of developers signing up and companies hiring and making offers to engineers, over the following 48 hours, we had tens of thousands of engineers and hundreds of companies sign up. I've been fortunate enough to have a lot of media attention over the past decade across my businesses, but I've never seen such a strong response from a single blog post, no matter where it has been. So we knew at that point that we had built something that just needed to exist at that point in time, and that would be a race to the finish line. And there would be copycats, there would be clones popping up, and we needed to be well capitalized in order to capture as much of the opportunity as possible.
Yeah, cool. Now, Hive.com, pretty good domain name.
Yes.
Was it expensive?
It was $125,000.
For a single word domain name, that's actually not
Down
too bad.
from $250, which was the asking price.
Yeah, cool. Did you buy it on Flippa?
No.
And was that a long process to acquire that name? Because getting a good name is kind of vital, right?
Yeah, we actually hired a naming agency who spent several days with us coming up with a list of possibilities. You know, we could have been called Haystack, we could have been called Full Stack, we looked at Saffron. The most expensive spice by weight in the world is another name possibility. But just kind of worked our way down the list, saw what domain names were able to be trademarked, saw what domain name owners were asking for in terms of domain name acquisition costs. We just landed on the Hive name.
Yeah, cool. Because years ago, someone, it might have been me, I had a lead generation business and I called it Leads Now. But then when I bought the domain name, everyone said it just said Let Snow. So it didn't work. It wasn't going very well anyway. Now, so being a 16-year-old, sitting in your bedroom, building a website and getting some traction and some advertising, it's very different to growing a company with 100 staff. How have you set the culture? How have you kind of scaled out that culture in the company? Because it's a very different skill set.
It is a very different skill set. Every time I've been able to do it better. And the great thing with Hired is we were able to put in a really strong foundation from the early days of the business. So we started doing quarterly strategic planning sessions when there was 20 of us. We started doing performance reviews internally when it was 35, 40 people. We hired our first director of HR when we were 42 people in the company. We started doing a lot of bigger company things earlier, which allowed us to scale much faster without as many things breaking along the way.
Cool. Now I've heard that the Hired office buys a lot of Dom Perignon. Is that right? What's going on there? Maybe there's a little note here, something about Dom Perignon, but is there a story there?
Yeah. So 99 Designs, when we made hires and we got these invoices for $30,000, $40,000 from the recruiters, they sometimes sent us a little gift. In one case, that gift was a 6-pack of donuts. This is fucking insane. Giving these guys so much money. My realtor buys me a nice gift basket and champagne. I'm like, they can definitely do a lot better. So when we created the company, I'm like, I'm just gonna fucking give everybody a ball of dough. And we literally had a room in our office stacked floor to ceiling with hundreds of thousands of dollars of Dom Perignon. At one point, our office manager in San Francisco got a phone call from the CEO of the liquor retailer that we buy from. They're like, what's going on? Why are you buying so much Dom Perignon? You're like the biggest buyer in the state of California. Are you working with like Jay-Z or Kanye West? Like, what's going on?
Cool. And you still do that?
We still do it.
That's really cool. So where's Hired at now? So I know you launched in Australia this week, and that's obviously the reason behind your trip down here. So as a business, where do you see Hired? Where is it on its journey? Does it still feel like a startup? Is it still a startup?
It absolutely is still a startup, but at a much bigger scale. We have about 250 employees now. We operate in 17 markets, 5 countries, offices on 3 continents, 3.5 years after founding the business. But we barely scratch the surface of what's possible. We're in a massive industry that's massively broken, but also massively important. And the Hired name really represents the scope of our ambition. It's not just Hired for software engineers and data scientists, designers. It's Hired for everything, which includes finance professionals, healthcare, so on and so forth.
Cool. Now you've had a few successes. I suppose you sometimes get the opportunity to sort of reflect back on the knowledge you have today. Would you change much going back on your journey? Are there things now that you wish you knew when you were 16 or 20 starting those businesses?
Yeah, I think the most important thing that I've learned along the way is how fast the ground can move under your feet. If you're running a business for any length of time, at certain critical points, like there's a shift in the landscape. An example of this would be Facebook. Initially, they were web only. They went public, and everybody was moving to mobile. They had to quickly retrain hundreds of developers, hire new product managers, and reimagine what the Facebook experience would look like on a mobile device. And then they had to figure out to monetize that as well, which was very uncertain. And this kind of stuff happens on a pretty regular basis in our industry. Like every 4 or 5 years, there's some dramatic shifts, and you have to be able to like make some radical moves in the direction of the ship in order to stay relevant. And
what do you foresee future shifts being for Hired? You see, deep learning, or video, or what do you see kind of some sort of catalyst that you think might be coming up that you might need to get ready for?
Yeah, so from the very first day of the business, from our very first candidate-employer interaction, we've maintained a lossless data policy. We've captured literally trillions of events and interactions on our platform and off-platform as well. And then more recently, we've started building a data science team internally to create better value for both sides of the marketplace. And data becomes a really, really powerful moat over time. It becomes really, really hard for a new player to come in and create the same experience for a candidate or an employer that we would have given the massive amount of data we've collected over the years now.
Yeah, because the more data once you have, the more you can feed it, the smarter it gets.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
And I was going to say, and so what do you think the keys to your success have been? If you look back and go, oh, it's been an interesting journey. What have been keys to your success, would you think?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing has been a relentless focus on customers and customer service. So at 99 Designs, we were the first company in the entire world to offer 100% money-back guarantee on graphic design services. That simply did not exist before we came around. Through SitePoint, I paid $10,000 for the first logo, and they gave me 3 options to choose from. I mean, we had radically shifted the landscape by creating something that was like 90% cheaper and 100 times better than the next best alternatives. Yeah. The other thing that's been really key along the way is like starting companies that I'm passionate about. No business is ever a straight line. If you're truly passionate about the mission and purpose for being, that kind of gets you up in the morning when you hit a rough patch. Anybody who starts a company for this glory that comes with being an entrepreneur or whatever, or a hope of striking it rich, is probably not going to be able to make it through kind of the trough of sorrow that every company inevitably faces at some point in their life. Cool.
So what countries is Hired in at the moment, and why was Australia the right time to launch?
Yeah, so we're in the US, Canada, France, and the UK, and Australia, obviously. Yeah. The Melbourne and Sydney startup market has been growing tremendously over the past few years. There's more investors, more capital, more people leaving companies that are successful and going off to do their own thing in the past few years. Obviously, there's a huge talent shortage here as well. And how do we allow Australian companies to tap into a global talent pool? And some of the former Australians that might live abroad want to come back to the country after getting experience in a place like Silicon Valley or New York City. By having a global network, we can make that possible.
Cool. And don't forget, guys, if you want to ask some questions, please throw them up on Slido. Do we have any questions through yet? One come through? Just laying up there at the moment, what's happening there. But we'll say if anyone's got some questions, the first 3 questions we'll get a book from Ash Morea, which is the, it's called Scaling Lean. Yeah, so, let's not just, here we go, there's a question. I'll have to jump around and read it. If you had to start from scratch again Building an online community, how would you do it? Like from scratch, no custom, no community. So obviously SitePoint was a great base. How would you start from scratch?
Yeah, if I was starting from scratch, I would figure out where my audience that I'm trying to reach is now currently, and then try and contribute to those communities through guest blog posting, etc., to bring them over to your side. And doing like a really non-salesy way, not a self-promotional way, but just create really, really great content that then resonates with individuals you're trying to reach, and find mediums pushing that out.
Cool. Which is kind of how you started what became SitePoint, right? Yeah, cool. Here's Tom. It's Tom. There you go, Tom. There you go, mate. I'll take a look out to you.
The other thing with building communities obviously is focus. You don't want to go too broad from day one. It's better to be niche and then expand and expand. Use that as a strategy.
Question you may have mentioned before. Do you a lot of time on designs, but do you plan to IPO?
I mean, IPO isn't an exit strategy; it's a fundraising strategy. And when the time comes, we'll look at and evaluate all the options available to us, whether it makes sense to go back to the private markets, raise a growth round, or go to public markets.
Yeah.
But it's not an exit strategy. I mean, especially for the founders, you can't.
What do you think about exit strategies? Because some people, I meet some startups and they've already got the exit strategy in plan. It's sort of already kind of planned out. What do you think about that? If you're a startup, you're already sort of thinking, how will I exit? How will I cash out? Do you ever think about that, or do you think is that flawed thinking?
It's a little bit of a flawed thinking. I mean, a lot of businesses will never cash out, quite frankly. There won't be any buyers there that are interested. So how do you build a sustainable, profitable business with a good moat that you're happy running? And maybe the strategy is just dividends.
Yeah, sure. Who asked the question about the IPO? Nobody? Okay, cool. So how do you invest? How do you get time to keep investing in learning? Do you do a lot of reading? Do you listen to podcasts? How do you keep up to date with everything? You mentioned shifting around before. So
Yeah.
There's a lot to keep up with these days.
Yeah,
How do you do that?
I have a huge home library. It turns out that not everything worthwhile reading is published in a 500-word Medium blog post. There's actually a lot of really great information that you can get in hardcover format or on your Kindle in some cases now. I try and read 2 to 4 books a month typically.
Oh, okay.
And it's some fantastic information out there. Most of the problems that startups are facing, whether marketing problems, sales problems, people problems, recruiting problems, have been solved hundreds, thousands, millions of times over and over again. And it's been documented really, really well. Like you read Peter Drucker's books from the 60s and 70s, and what he talks about, it's just as applicable to a startup as it was to the companies back then.
And what's the most interesting book you've read in the last couple of months?
I've been reading The Power of Habit, which is a really good book. And then I also read the autobiography of Sam Walton, the founder of Walmart. So when he was in his 70s, he got diagnosed with bone cancer, and he wanted to put down his legacy and his story in writing. So he was very introspective, laying out how he made Walmart so successful along the way, some of the big bets he made, and the strategies he followed. And obviously, the Walton family is like the richest, most successful entrepreneurial family in the history of America. And for $9.99 on Amazon, you can have Sam Walton as your personal mentor. I mean, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, cool. Who asked the question about learning? Anyone? Free book for anyone? No? Oh, what's okay, let's have a look at the next question here. Yeah, who in business is your biggest idol?
I mean, I don't really have any idols. I find there's a lot you can learn from, lots of individual entrepreneurs. Some companies are terrific at branding, others are great at marketing, others are great at user experience. So you take the bits and pieces of what makes sense and figure out how to mash it together to service your customers.
And just that thing about learning, is that something you've always done, or is that a habit that you've formed more recently that you've realized I need to continue to grow and learn? Is that something you've always done since you were young?
I actually started reading Fortune magazine when I was 14 years old. So my friends were reading Maxim and stuff. And I was reading about the latest IPO or an interview with Bill Gates. Yeah. So I've always been very, very curious about that.
Cool. Who asked that, the last question about the idol? Free book, anybody? No, I can't give away these books, man. Okay, next question from Fiona. I'm going to find you. What was the biggest challenge? Let's just pick off the screen there. What was the biggest challenge Hire.com has faced, and how did you get through it?
So a couple of challenges. First and foremost, I think I mentioned earlier, we had trouble getting companies onto the platform initially. And when we did the companies to sign up, we had trouble with them disclosing salary information up front. So one of the value propositions of Hire is creating alignment from the very first interaction. So as part of that, we asked employers to provide an indicative salary that they'd be willing to offer to the hire. That was very unusual. And I had a lot of conversations and hundreds of phone calls in the earliest days of the business, convincing employers that's the right thing for them to do. Like, nobody benefits when that interview process falls apart after 10, 20 hours of investment on both sides because of misalignment of the expectations. Like, a classic story of this is one of the earliest engineers at hired, Nate Clark. He worked at Pivotal, actually, in San Francisco. He'd been there for 3.5 years, wanted to look what else is out there. He got contacted by a recruiter, met a company that he was interested in. Over the course of 3 weeks and 5 or 6 rounds of interviews, he finally got to the end stages, and they made him an offer that was 30% less than what he was currently making. His wife was pregnant at the time. He had a new baby. San Francisco is very expensive. He wasn't in a position to take a pay cut, so he declined the offer and got pretty jaded by the entire experience, quite frankly, until 6 months later he came across an ad for hire. And he kind of latched onto the value proposition, joined our platform, and we were obviously lucky enough to get installed with that company.
Cool, fantastic. Fiona, I know you're here. There you are. Here's a book. So if you don't know, so the book is called Scaling Lean. It's by Ash Maria, who we had as a guest at Startup Grind a few months ago. He also wrote the Lean Canvas, so reasonably famous for that. The next question is from Albert, which was, what was your, I think it was top three advice for entrepreneurs who are starting marketplace startups?
Number one, you're a little bit crazy to expand the marketplace. Most businesses, you only need to get customers. You need to get customers and suppliers, and you have to maintain an equilibrium between both sides of the marketplace at all times. Otherwise, you risk creating a bad experience, which leads to churn. So I think the failure rate for marketplace businesses is probably infinitely higher than any type of company that you could start. But I would say in terms of advice that's applicable, be very, very, very narrow in your scope initially. So when we launched Hired, it wasn't hired for engineers everywhere. It wasn't even hired for engineers in San Francisco. It was hired for engineers who worked at these 5 companies that went to these 5 schools. And those were the only applicants that we targeted and led onto the platform. And only once we had proven that there's a good matchmaking model there and the flywheel started spinning, that we expanded broader and broader and broader. But I think what kills a lot of marketplace businesses is just they're too ambitious on day one and try to be everything for everyone. As a result, they're nothing to no one.
Yeah, cool. Now you live in Vancouver, Canada. Now back in 1999, 2000, San Francisco was the center of the startup universe. But you don't live in San Francisco. I mean, can you build a startup from anywhere, and why are you in Vancouver and not in San Francisco?
Have you been watching the election?
I try not to.
It's a little bit scary. I have trouble telling between the SNL skits and the real thing.
Yeah.
But I mean, SF is definitely the epicenter. It's like being in Florence during the Renaissance, quite frankly. I think every entrepreneur should be out there on a regular basis. Doesn't mean you have to live there full time, but you can go visit 3-4 times a year. I do it once a month, pretty much, and be in touch with the people there. It's incredibly productive. Obviously, from a capital fundraising standpoint, there is a lot of money in San Francisco, a lot of angel investors, a lot of people who cashed out at unicorns and various companies that have gone public over the last decades. That's a fantastic source.
Yeah, so people are sitting here today thinking, can I run a global business here from Australia? Can you, or do you need to go overseas, or what's the sort of dynamic there?
Yeah, 99 Designs, if it was an Australian-only business, it wouldn't have worked from day one. Most of our customers are overseas in the US and in Europe, so we need to build a global business on day one in order to build something that was at a substantial scale. Local marketplaces are obviously much, much more difficult when you're trying to build liquidity within a 25 or 50 kilometer radius. And the launch strategy for that is very, very different. And that is the hardest of the hard for marketplaces to create.
Yeah.
Versus Flippa 99 Designs are obviously completely location agnostic, so it's a lot easier to get liquidity because the buyer and seller can be located anywhere in the world and still transact with each other.
Cool. I'll just Albert Meyer, who's been a great supporter of the ecosystem. Here's a book, mate. Albert from Airtasker. You're welcome, good to see you. We'll just do a couple more questions. You built a number of businesses, and all the previous ones are now run by CEOs. How do you know when it's the right time to hand over the CEO from the founder?
Yeah, so with Hired, actually, we brought in a chief operating officer, Mehul Patel, when the company was only a couple months old. He was the chief operating officer for the first couple of years of the company, and we ended up with 150 people. We've gone to later stages of fundraising. We promoted him to the role, knowing that he was aligned with the culture. He had been there from the earliest days. He's like the 4th co-founder of the business for all essential purposes. and that was like a very low risk maneuver for us. So I think if you can set it up that way from the earliest days of your business, you de-risk it quite a bit. Having a CEO when you're forced by the board and having somebody externally who has been ingrained in your culture and the ups and downs of your business from earliest days is a risky value proposition, I would say, a lot of the time.
And you did it with 99 Designs, right? With David Llewellyn, came in.
With Patrick Llewellyn.
Patrick Llewellyn,
yes.
And how did you find him? What was the process of getting Patrick on board as the CEO?
Yeah, so initially he joined us as president of North America, actually, and then he got promoted to the CEO role. So once again, we had to de-risk ourselves by not handing somebody the C-level title from day one of the business. I think there's a fantastic book that every entrepreneur should read. It's called The Founder's Dilemma, and it talks about some of the hard choices that you'll face as your company scales. And there's a saying, there's two ways to get fired from your own company. Number one is if you're not successful and your investors are scared of losing their funding, they'll replace you and kick you out. The second way of being kicked out is if your company is too successful and your investors are scared you'll screw it up because you just can't scale the company fast enough. So how do you set up the right dynamic so that you can contribute to the business, stay involved, do things that you're passionate about, but not necessarily like have those.
Next question is a good one. If you're going to move in after hire, what are you thinking you might do next? What's an industry that excites you or you think is ripe for disruption? Is that a secret?
Yeah, I don't have any great ideas at the moment that I'd be passionate about pursuing. Running a business is all-engrossing, all-encompassing. It is incredibly stressful. It's not something I would jump into unless I found something that I thought would be really impactful. I think hired is that thing that I can work on for the next 10, 15, 20 years and still get excited about. Ultimately choosing where you're going to work, who you're going to work with, what you're going to work on, and how much you're going to get paid for that work is one of those critical life decisions that people make without full understanding of all the options available to them. Like, other than choosing who your spouse or life partner is, or maybe what your major in college is going to be, it's one of those like key decisions that we think we can make a really big impact on. And nothing is more fantastic than when I'm walking around like San Francisco in my Hired hoodie and like someone runs across the street like, oh, do you work at Hired? And they tell me their story like, yeah, I was on the web, I lived in like Wisconsin, I was browsing some video game sites, I saw an ad for Hired, clicked it, signed up, not really expecting anything to happen. 2 weeks later, I'm flying out to interviews in San Francisco, and now I work at Uber, doing fantastic work, learning a lot from my coworkers, and getting paid 50% more. And you made it possible. You grabbed me by the hand and led me across. Otherwise, I would have been stuck in my little town, not learning as much, just living kind of going through the motions of a job. But now I'm like truly happy, truly passionate, and you guys made it possible. Like, that is life-changing. It's not about delivering sandwiches or dog walking or some of these other startups. It's like truly, truly meaningful. And that's like kind of the passion and mission that rallies everybody who's at Hired.
Yeah, and you need goodies in San Francisco because it's so cold most of the time, right? We'll have to get one. That sounds really good. Now, the next question is a question we get a lot at Startup Grind from different founders. Is about raising capital. And raising capital in Australia versus the US. I mean, it seems like every week we're hearing about another fund of $100 million announced. I don't know how many checks are getting written. But what do you see the differences as far as raising capital here in Australia versus the US?
Yeah, I think from what I've seen, Australian investors are slightly more risk averse. There's also a little bit of a gap in funding stages between kind of the seed and later stage rounds. And ultimately, if you're looking for a $100 million plus check, you have to look overseas. Yeah. But not every business actually needs to be venture funded. 99 Designs was bootstrapped the first 3 years of its existence. SitePoint and Flippa have raised barely any capital along the way. It's not the right strategy for every company. You have to be very, very convinced that the outcomes you can deliver justify it. And I think this official stat is that 70% of founders of venture-funded companies make $0 at the end of it all. They get wiped out.
Yeah, I mean, like Matt Barry from Freelance is very passionate about saying that you can raise money in Australia. There's a public market. It's called the Australian Stock Exchange. What do you think are the differences and pros and cons between going public markets or private markets?
Yeah, companies shouldn't go public unless they have very, very predictable revenue. The first time you miss your quarterly earnings forecast estimate, your stock is just going to get pummeled. Yeah. It's very risky. You have to make sure you have the underlying infrastructure, financial planning, and systems in place where you can generate very consistent, predictable revenues for investors. And ultimately, like public market investors are fickle. They can sell your stock in 5 seconds from their iPhone anywhere in the world. Is that like a true long-term business partner that you want for your company?
Cool. This is a really interesting question because in some businesses I started, I tried getting a co-founder, and I found it really hard to find someone that was as passionate as I was. I just kind of do it by myself. Yeah. What do you think about that you must have a co-founder or you can do it by yourself when you're starting a company?
Yeah, I think co-founder is incredibly valuable. Startups are full of ups and downs and self-doubts and kind of days when you're down, and having somebody to talk to and lift your spirits, somebody kind of just going through the same thing at the same time as you that you can be very open and transparent with is like incredibly important. Like that emotional support network to get you through. Ultimately, like running a company requires multiple different skill sets. You might not be the best at everything, so how do you find somebody to balance out your weaknesses so that 1 + 1 = 3?
Yeah, it's a good point actually. I often get scared when I see co-founders and they're very similar in personalities. But of course, what you're saying is you need complementary personalities, the skills that you don't have. So probably just how much time we got there? So I'll have a question here. Hey.
Thanks, Brendan. There's a podcast by Tim Ferriss that's very popular that I listen to a lot that supports 99 Designs, but Tim tries to unearth, I suppose, habits or routines in successful people or high-performing people. Is there anything in your day-to-day that you'd like to share with us that I suppose keeps you sharp, keeps you successful, keeps you performing at a high level?
Yeah, a couple of things. First and foremost, I mentioned earlier, like reading a lot is incredibly valuable, like building a home library, buying like a dozen books every 3-4 months and going through those. Listening to podcasts, really fantastic as well. I fall asleep listening to like the HBR podcast and different interviews every single night. Number 3 is being really data driven. One of the very early things that we did at Hired, which has made us successful, was unlock all of our data and make it broadly available within the company to people who weren't technical or didn't know SQL. So we ended up using a tool called Looker, but there's many ones out there. That allows people to make really data-driven decisions on the spot and be able to answer their own questions and kind of be their own kind of investigator. And that is very, very important as we kind of, the cost of every mistake that you make as a company kind of goes up exponentially as you grow. So how do you kind of build this culture where everybody can have access to data and it's not just 1 or 2 analysts or 1 or 2 people on the business intelligence team that hold all the keys to the information and knowledge.
Yeah, because there's one thing about capturing all the data, but you've also got to use it and get some business intelligence out of it. So probably just last 2 questions, Matt. The question's about, were your investors happy with $125K that you paid for Hired.com, and how did that change the business over Hired.io?
Yeah, that was actually a scary move. At the time, we only had like $2.7 million in the bank, so 125 was a pretty big check. And so remember, I sent the email to our office manager asking her to initiate the wire transfer. She called me up in a panic. She's like, "What the fuck? Like, misplaced decimal point here." I'm like, no, this is like the bet that we're making, and we think it's a valuable asset and really important to the company. But at the time, it was definitely not sure thing.
Yeah, cool. And last question, Matt. Full-time roles are being disrupted at the moment. And the growth of casual work, obviously, e.g. Uber, ring the bell, I did a presentation with the word Uber in it, it's great. How's Hired.com going to cope with that if there's less full-time roles and there's more casualization of contract roles?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the US, we already have a product for contract workers who want to work on an hourly, weekly, or monthly basis with different companies. And we see that definitely being kind of the trend line. I think in the US, it's 40% of all workers contract as casual. That's going to be 60% over the next decade or 2. So we're riding that trend line and supporting both types of work. Our mission is to get everybody a job they love. Sometimes that's a full-time job at a bigger company where you're working 40 hours a week. Sometimes that's a job at an early stage high-risk startup where you're working evenings and weekends. And sometimes that's contract work. Depends where you are in your life stage, what you need at that point in time. We want to be able to support the opportunities regardless of what you need.
Cool, fantastic. Well, Matt, thanks for your openness, thanks for your honesty, and thanks for coming to Startup Grind here in Sydney. Would everyone please join me in thanking Matt Mickiewicz.